strategy 4 for the content area and writing process strategy notebook. This can be strategy 4. It's called the peer response. I did this for the agribusiness content area within agriculture for the 10th or 12th grade level. The TEKs go over professional standards in agribusiness, going over different uh, businesses and companies that relate to agriculture, writing over them and researching over them, and allowing students to explore career opportunities within them. Um, Instructions for use, once again, this is called the peer response strategy. Instructions for use, it's going to be in the editing and revising stages of the writing process, which means this strategy is done after the students are done writing a draft over something. And the topic I would allow them to write the draft over is research an ag business company that you'd be interested in working for, include history, sector of ag, brief overview of products they produce or sell or provide, and other relevant facts that you think would give information about the company. That would actually be the topic they would draft over, and this strategy isn't for drafting, but it's for right after the editing and revising process. So the editing and revising processes will be implemented through this strategy after the draft over what I just read. After they do the draft, uh, they'll get in partners, and they'll both be each other's peers, but they're going to revise and edit and include responses to each other's papers. So they're both going to be writers from the drafting process, but then they're both going to be editors, responders, and revisers, each partner, since they're in pairs of two. Um, they can give their partner either a printed copy if they typed it, or a handwritten copy if it's handwritten just on a piece of paper. Provide that to their partner, and the first thing the partner is going to do, they're going to edit the paper. They're going to check for grammar, spelling, and punctuation factors, and then the second thing they're going to do after they edit, this will allow them to read through it again, uh, edit, and then revise. The revising will be going over checking of suggestions of the overall flow of the paper, like does this need to go here, this word needs to be here, doesn't need to be here, stuff like that. And they can note their revising and editing corrections on the paper or on the sides or margins of the paper. And after they do the revising and editing, and that's also part of the peer response or peer review strategy, is the peer response strategy part of it's the editing and revising process, is that they are going to make a response sheet for their partner's writing, and their response sheets, each person will have one and complete it for each partner's writing. It's going to include answers to feedback like strong parts of your writing are, I like this part of your writing, and then here's some things that you can improve upon or fix in your piece. And these don't serve to be like, hey, you're not a good writer. They just serve to as a thing to allow the writers to say, hey, my peer thought this, so maybe I need to go back and look at it before I submit it as a grade. So it just gives the students a friend or a buddy or an extra eye to look at their paper before they submit it to the teacher for a final major grade, since it's a paper. In that feedback response paper, they're going to just go over all those things and go over feedback that can serve to improve their original draft. And then after they do the response sheet, after the response editing and revising is done, the students will give each other their response sheets and sit down with one another and explain their response sheets and why they said what they did, allowing the student, the corresponding original writer or student, to learn more about how they could improve or things that were good about their paper. And that will allow them to go over that before they start the final copy or publishing stage of the paper. Strengths and benefits, kind of going off the article, it said that the peer review or peer responses can be dynamic and successful, and that editors and writers work constantly with each other to scaffold, so they can kind of go over like this part work, this doesn't, and just work together, which is always good for students. And then it also provides learning opportunities that can lead to learning more about the actual writing process, because they're looking at, they're editing, revising, and responding to each other's papers. They're not just writing and editing their own. They're looking at all different factors and their partner's papers. So instead of just looking at theirs, they're able to learn more about the whole writing process in general. So those are just some strengths. Made example. So right here, I'll kind of zoom in on it. This is going to be the first step, the editing step. Editing would be punctuation and spelling, so you can use different writing utensils or colors, like spelling mistakes were highlighted in yellow and corrected. Punctuation, like uh, close quotations or commas or periods, were highlighted in green. And then in this particular case, this was just kind of a draft. This wouldn't be like maybe a paper a student would write or anything. This was just kind of a rough draft for a good example I wanted to do. Uh, he did the kind of the revision or the flow revision and corrections in a blue pen, and it was just saying up here he made a note to his original writer student that he was editing and revising for. It was like, hey, maybe this first paragraph should be down here at the end of the paper. That would revise and make the flow go a little better. So you could just use different colors and different writing utensils to go through the editing, like punctuation, spelling, and then the flow, like where sentences or paragraphs should be. So that was that editing and revising step. And then the peer response or response sheet. This would be like the first person. The writer of this was Brian, and then the editor was Blake. I just made up names. And then on this, the writer is Blake, and the responder and editor, all that is going to be Brian. So Blake made a little paper over agribusiness, and as you can see, it wasn't very complex or anything, but still had some good information. Once again, I just kind of made this up. Hopefully, the students will put in a little more effort into that and have a better paper with more information, but this was just for an example. And then his partner, the responder, Brian, because once again, Blake wrote this, responded to it on the response sheet saying, strong parts, I like this, and suggested improvements. Like a strong part, he said he liked the paragraph structures. And then he liked the writer, researcher variety of the products they have and sell. But then, as you can see, there's a bunch of suggested improvements. And once again, these aren't meant to critique or tell the student they're bad at writing, but just help them and lead them into a better step before their final paper is graded. So some suggested improvements, he was like, research more about the background, or you're a little too relaxed talking about the career benefits, just talking about money and you wanted a job. You might can say about these reasons too, to be more of a professional and add to the overall flow and professionalism of the paper. So once again, that'd be the response sheet under the peer response strategy. And that was a source and all that. And once again, this was a peer response or review strategy for agribusiness 10th through 12th grade levels. And it's for the editing and revision writing process stages. Thank you.